When I was younger, my dad asked me to go down to the basement with him to fetch some tools he needed for something. Our building had 2 staircases, the main staircase and a fire escape that led to an emergency exit. Right next to that exit was the basement entrance. Once my dad found the tools he needed, we started heading back to our apartment. But as we reached our floor, something felt off. We looked in the direction of our apartment, but instead of the familiar hallway, there was just a wall. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Everything looked normal in the opposite direction, though, so my dad took a few steps back, thinking we must have gone to the wrong floor. But it wasn't. Our floor was the only one with a small table next to the staircase, and there it was. Confused, we started going up and down the floors, knocking on doors, asking people if they could direct us. Each time, strangers would answer, people who didn't look familiar at all. My dad was continuously knocking on doors of supposed friends, but none of the people answering looked like anyone I'd ever seen. I knew my dad's friends, and I also knew the people who lived on our floor, so I would have recognized them immediately. There was one door left, one we felt like we'd already tried but hadn't. When the door opened, a tall, thin woman with long dark hair stood there, smiling in an unsettling way. My dad asked her for directions, and she just kept smiling. Then she looked down at me, her eyes meeting mine, and for some reason, I felt frozen in place. I couldn't look away. Finally, she said the way to our apartment was through hers. We stepped inside her apartment, and in the blink of an eye, my dad and I were suddenly standing in front of our apartment door. It was as if we'd teleported there. My mom, who was waiting for us, asked, "What took you so long? You were gone for almost 30 minutes. I tried to explain that we'd been lost, but she didn't believe me. My dad, however, looked terrified. He knew something strange had happened. To this day, I'm not sure if it really happened, or if we were just hallucinating. But I'll never forget the way that woman looked at me, staring deep into my eyes, as if she knew something I didn't. It felt like we'd stumbled into some kind of alternate reality, almost like the backrooms you hear about, where the people answering those doors were entities, and my dad and I were the targets. I never believed in the backrooms. Just another urban legend, a creepypasta conjured by bored internet users. Ghosts, aliens, they all seemed like tales for people craving mystery. But then I saw things I can't unsee. It started as a joke. One night my friends and I were hanging out, scrolling Reddit like usual, when we stumbled on a post about the backrooms. You know the story. An endless maze of empty, off-white rooms, dimly lit by flickering fluorescents, filled with a relentless hum and an inexplicable sense of dread. "Dude, we should totally try to find a way in there," Mike laughed, half serious. We all chuckled, but somehow, the idea stuck with me. Maybe it was the thrill of proving myself, or maybe it was just curiosity. Either way, I found myself late that night, trawling the internet for clues on how to no-clip into the backrooms. The instructions were cryptic, scattered with strange symbols and vague warnings, but I was hooked. The following Friday, I convinced my friends to drive out to an abandoned warehouse at the edge of town, a supposed weak spot where reality could fracture just enough to let someone slip through. The place was dim and silent, our laughter barely masking the tension. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes and focused on nothing, just like the forums had said. I felt a tingling wash over me. The warehouse seemed to blur, and then, there I was. I opened my eyes to find myself in a dimly lit corridor, the air thick and sour. My friends were gone. I don't know how long I wandered those endless halls, startled by every shadow, my heartbeat the only rhythm I could trust. The hum of those flickering lights dug into my head, and the feeling of isolation was suffocating. I kept expecting to turn a corner and see someone, anyone, or even just a hint this was all some elaborate prank. But that never happened. Now I'm scrawling this note on a scrap of paper, trying to accept the truth. This isn't a prank. The backrooms are real, and I'm trapped. God, how I wish I could go back, tell my friends it was just an internet myth, that none of it was worth the risk. If you're reading this, remember, curiosity isn't worth it. Never try to find the back rooms, because if you do, you might not make it back. About 6 years ago, I ended up in what felt like the back rooms. Let me explain. Every evening, I'd go for a walk, and one night, everything changed. There's a big open field I often passed by. I never knew who owned it, but I always walked there. The owner was known to call the cops for trespassing, but I was fast, so nobody ever caught me. I went to college nearby and made these walks a nightly ritual. Every time I passed this one spot, I noticed a horrible smell, strong and foul. I never saw anything causing it and didn't care to check. There was a homemade sign there that read, "Do not enter. Consequences will be served." I also lived close to the area, and every night at 2:59 a.m., I'd hear a piercing scream from somewhere in that field. It woke me up without fail, night after night. I finally decided I'd go for a walk around that time to see what was going on. That's how my late night walks began. The next night, I went out around 10 p.m., and when I reached the field, I didn't hear a scream, but a faint chilling sound. Someone was sobbing. I panicked and ran back inside, immediately calling the cops. They conducted a search but didn't find anything, or so they said. A month later, I learned they had found a dead body there, but they'd kept it quiet. The next morning, I took my usual walk and decided to pass by that spot again. As I left the area, everything felt off. Suddenly, it was dark, even though it had been morning just seconds ago. I ran to my house, but something was wrong. There was nothing and no one inside. I hurried to my neighbor's place, but it was empty too, like everyone had just vanished. I grabbed my phone to check the time, but it wouldn't turn on, and I hadn't powered it off or let it die. Then, I looked at my watch. March 12th, 1923, 12:37 a.m. As I tried to make sense of things, I noticed a figure in the distance. It was a tall creature, at least 9 feet tall, and it moved straight toward me at an inhuman speed. I bolted back into that forbidden area, desperate to escape. Then, just like that, it was daytime again. After that, I moved away and never returned. I haven't heard a scream since, but that night haunts me. Whatever I stepped into wasn't meant to be found.